Law professors Andre Douglas Pond Cummings of Indiana Tech Law School and Donald F. Tibbs from Drexel University's Thomas R. Klein School of Law discussed their book, Hip Hop and the Law, at Indiana Tech Law School in Fort Wayne. Hip Hop and the Law is a collection of articles and essays that explore how hip hop music and culture intersect with the law and legal issues, from intellectual property law to mass incarceration. Cummings and Tibbs edited the book with the late Pamela Bridgewater Touré, an activist lawyer and legal scholar who specialized in issues related to reproduction, sexuality, identity, poverty, and women's health. Touré's husband, attorney at law Kwaku A. Touré, attended the Hip Hop and the Law discussion and book signing at Indiana Tech.
My wife really loved these two guys. And as they said earlier, when she was very sick, there were times when she would speak with them on the phone, and I would have to take the oxygen mask or the oxygen down just so she can talk to them. And then after the phone call, I would sneak around into the dining room and call André and say, look, you can't keep her more than 10 minutes, she can only breathe but so long. So this is the labor of love.
Before the discussion, Professor Tibbs answered a few questions about hip hop and the law. Mr. Tibbs, with hip hop and the law, what took so long?
I think part of what took so long is the way that hip-hop sort of gets marginalized as both an art form and particularly by law and the legal profession specifically. It's been a long time coming, but the conversations related to law and hip-hop have been going on since the very beginning.
Okay, now when it comes to freedom of speech and then some of these artists getting busted for what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, we saw that a lot with NWA back in the day and Two Live Crew.
Right.
But in popular culture, you can look back to Hollywood and the Hays Code.
Yeah.
You can look back to comic books and the Comics Code.
Yeah.
So talk about that relation between powerful popular culture and the clampdown that usually follows.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the case. I mean, the suppression of free speech has always been a problem for this country in terms of constitutional rights. You know, what things should be said, what things should not be said, the impact of those words on others and on moving others, and particularly into social movements, is something that it has always been sort of deeply problematized as it pertains to the First Amendment. I think hip-hop is drawn into that fray because of how deeply expressive the lyrics are in sort of providing a no-holds-barred critique of American law, American politics, American people, politicians themselves, and American culture. And so, you know, sometimes when you say things in a very sort of vitriolic way, people don't want to hear it that way. And so the first thing to do is to try to clamp down on it, to shut it down, to suppress the speech. But, you know, one of the things that allows hip-hop and other art forms to survive is that you can only suppress speech in some very specific ways and for some very specific reasons. And hip-hop doesn't quite fall into any of those categories.
Now, I would find nowadays when you've got Kendrick Lamar kicking it with Taylor Swift.
Right.
You got Snoop Dogg singing with Katy Perry.
Right.
Well, hip hop and rap seems to be engulfed into pop culture.
Yeah.
So at what point does it become really socially relevant again?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question of what do you mean, you know, by socially relevant. You know, hip hop and rap music has never been socially irrelevant. It's just been marginalized in ways. It's from the very beginning it was seen as just a black art form for black people, for black culture, and sort of a vehicle and an insight into black culture. But, you know, we both know, or we should all know, right, that the major purchaser of hip-hop music happens to be young white males as opposed to young black males. And so that sort of spillover into pop culture has now made people recognize that, you know, rap artists are they're not just rapping, they're actually poets, right? And they're poets who are setting some very important critiques to music, staying on beat, staying with pentameter and all those other things that matter. And so I think the spillover into pop culture has allowed hip hop to become much more popular itself among the mainstream listeners.
Now, when I talk about being socially relevant, I would make the comparison between Chuck D talking about rap and hip hop being CNN for black people.
CNN for black people, yes.
Versus what I would see now with a lot of this dance club stuff.
Right.
It's just the BET for black people.
Right.
When does it become hard-hitting again rather than just this dance stuff?
That's a really good question. I mean, you know, I would sort of maybe push back a little bit and say, you know, if you remember the genesis of hip hop, the whole design behind hip hop in the very beginning was to be an art form or produce a narrative that was an entertainment, right? Entertainment for the crowd at parties. So the reality is that hip hop actually began as sort of moving the crowd, as Eric B. and Rakim said, right? Getting people to dance at clubs. And then it transformed. It moved into providing social critique with, with songs like The Message from Grandmaster Flash, and then into the Chuck D era was providing a much deeper critique of American law and culture, American popular culture. You have to also understand that just like any other art form, there's going to be so many different subgenres, right? And there still are artists out there who are providing the kind of social critique that we used to get from Chuck D and Public Enemy when we listened to that group. I think also it's really hard to keep up with all of the artists now because we've moved from just record labels producing records, as in the days of NWA, to social media, YouTube. You know, anyone who sort of wants to be an artist can actually go on YouTube and promote themselves and sell their songs even across the internet. I think it's still socially relevant. It's just maybe fanned out a little bit.
Well, you set me straight. All right, you set me straight. I appreciate it. B96.9 FM on-air personality Gino Burgess attended the hip-hop and the law discussion before kicking some relevant knowledge to Summit City Noise during the book signing reception. Being in the industry you're in, you should know all about royalties and intellectual property.
A little bit.
So enlighten me a little bit.
Actually, the business has changed a whole much. I actually know another gentleman who actually ran Hollywood Records for a number of years. He was telling me, he said, you know, don't believe the hype you hear about the record companies hurting now because people can record like in their garage on Pro Tools, put an album out, and they're okay. He says what they started doing, they started signing those 360 deals with people. People are desperate to get a deal with a record company. They still want to do that. And so what they do is you sign with them, but if you sell any merchandise, you write a song for your friend down the street, the record company actually owns a piece of that. So you have to pay them if you write a song for your friend down. So they're still making their money. He said they're still doing fine.
In the mid-1990s, when major record labels got involved, the revolutionary power of the message began to be diluted, and it became all about bling, booty, sex, violence, because it sells. And in our view, corporate America had a huge role to play in diluting the powerful revolutionary message of hip-hop.